Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. We're here with all the members of Actuate Ventures, and we hope you enjoy today our podcast. And if you don't, it's on you. So let's go.
Love it.
We have a structure
Awesome.
today, so you better like it.
The first thing we're doing is we're updating like what's been happening. Big things have been happening. Chris, Andrew, Z, you guys have all had some really cool conversations. So paper rock scissors, who goes first with the updates on what's been going on in the company and the conversations we've had.
Paper,
Well,
rock, scissors, shoot.
I have no idea.
I just realized I was muted, but paper, rock, scissors, we kind of tied. I'll hop out and share a little something. I'll pass the mic. But one of the conversations we just got off is with one of our newest members, Josh Wagner, who is going to be our fund manager, managing partner, GP in what we're spinning up. He's got a ton of experience in the fund management and venture capital and angel investing world, especially when it comes to aerospace. So it's very, very exciting to have him on board. We were actually going through the details of what the structure and the infrastructure is actually going to look like. And come Monday, we're meeting with legal and finance to lock all those things in. So we will be a real, fully operational infrastructure in place venture studio at the beginning of next week, which is really, really exciting. And one of the other cool things is we've had a lot of educated assumptions that we've been working with of how this might look or how we might operate as a whole. And all of that, and just like everything else that we've been doing, is just being validated over and over and over again, which is phenomenal. We do come from a space of always being willing to learn, especially in new parts of certain ventures. But because of the fact that we've done our due diligence in what this might look like, and then having understood how some dynamics of various businesses and organizations operate, the assumptions that we've had about what this might look like have all been spot on, which is just even more exciting. But yeah, so we'll be a real company at the beginning of next week. Although we very much are operating at scale already to date, so that's super 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 exciting. And we've had some new resources and team members join over the past couple of weeks. Y'all will hear about that to come. But yeah, I'll pass the mic off to Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Um, yeah, we're getting our ducks in a row, and it's been an absolute blast building this organization. And having come from other startup ventures, like getting into the venture capital space, and you'll be hearing Venture Studio a lot more from us. And the future is it's what a lot of the VCs are moving into, basically, as they see that they need to really hone in on their focus. So we were told that a lot of these VCs are building their funds and they're like generalists for the longest time, from the .com era up until now, and that's because they could throw money in the wall and someone can come up to them and say, "Hey, I have a company, I'm raising 10 million," and they're like, "Well, here's 15." Yeah, those days are kind of over. COVID was a rude awakening. On why wasn't really there, and so where the money is kind of flowing, at least in our educated opinion, is that you need to focus in on a thesis. You need to have expertise, still being flexible enough to look at larger pictures and execute.
Yep.
Right. What's also just absolutely been a blast is in this week alone is we're continuing to meet new experts who are looking at the snowball effect that we're having and reaching out, and they're saying, "Hey, can we join your future council?" The future council is our advisory arm where people would jump in and essentially say, "Hey, we would like to know about the companies that you're possibly working in, and we provide expertise, mind share to you all." And then in return, when there are interesting projects that call on them, and then place them strategically where we need them to be. Um, so being able to talk to someone so far outside your educational depth, um, people that have more PhDs than probably we collectively have degrees on this podcast, which is an insane thing to think about, right? But they're excited to build a future with us.
Yeah, one thing that we've noticed is people are drawn toward this large vision that we have. And something that I learned when I was at Blue Origin is to think not just in the decades to come, but in the centuries to come. And having that multi-generational perspective and approach is really, really, really attractive and exciting to be a part of. So it's really stoked to see. And Z, how things been going in your world? You've been up to a lot too.
Yeah, it's been cool. I've been meeting with a few different companies in a couple of different spaces. I branched out a little from aerospace and moved a little bit into looking at deep tech companies just from a contact that I had in Mercury. So talking a bit of those. Just it's quite interesting to see the deep tech approach, what companies are kind of thinking about. There's the disinformation sort of arena, which is always interesting to me because the question always comes to how do you, like if you're working with one player, how do you not or do work with the other player? And it's kind of pretty interesting answers to have around that. And then there's the aspect which I'm excited for, which is coming up this coming week. It's deep tech kind of in the field of agro and kind of general concepts like that. I'm not sure, say how like the fishing world exists, right? I'm not sure if that's considered agriculture, but it's kind of in that realm. And it's super cool. It's very relevant. It's kind of updating a scene that hasn't been updated in a while. And then there's one other thing that I thought was super, super cool. Within like the aerospace industry, there's a lot of lacking standardization across different kind of approaches, I guess. And so there's a couple of companies that are thinking of working on standardization, kind of a simple degree, which is fantastic. But there's companies who have been also utilizing the existing small aspects of standardization that exists to build their platforms on top of, to then allow kind of the introduction of new useful products into any realm. Just because, hey, you already have this, right? You have to, because if you want it to be interoperable, cool, we're going to piggyback on that. And just kind of seeing these approaches, I think we know some pretty cool people. And I like how this working out.
I'm gonna throw a question. I know we had a format, but I'm gonna throw a question that kind of popped up that both Chris and Andrew, you kind of mentioned that there's a shift towards venture studios, and I've seen this too, and I think my thought is that it's because checks are being written differently. There's the shift in the financial landscape totally has moved, and venture studios are about being there on the journey with the founders. And so, do you think that's what the shift is, and how does that play a part in Actuate and what we do with the founders that we're talking to?
So
I was trying to find my mute button. I'm so used to it being on the interface. That's where the silence came from. But Chris, go ahead.
Andrew is one of those folks with a double mute button.
I am. I do have a
Physical
double
one
mute.
and a thing, and we need to get him like a mute like production lights, and whenever he accidentally flips it, he knows to take care of that. Andrew, you want to take it?
No, go ahead. I was actually gonna ask Z his perspective on how it's been received with the companies that he's been speaking to, because he's boots on the ground. Because it seems like there's an interesting interest in what we're doing because of that blend of an approach that we have.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was thinking about that as I was finishing what I was saying, and I was kind of we were bringing up this change in the venture world. Okay, cool. There's a change in the venture world. Now there's the issue from the company side where they kind of all they know about is checks, and it's kind of what they're used to. And venture studio. I mean, I remember even when I was founding companies and seeing what a venture studio was. Often it wasn't even called that. They had a different term for it. I forgot what it was. And generally, the funds that had these kinds of things barely really used them. It was very rare. So there's this aspect of kind of having to tell companies exactly what this is and how useful it is, and have them realize, okay, this is actually useful. And I've seen like one of the best approaches is good companies ask not just about kind of funds. They also ask kind of what else do you guys offer, which is it's cool. It's true. Because I guess in the old world, you get a check, at least the investor shuts up and you do your thing. And then there's that in-between stage where there's investors who give you a check and they don't shut up. You can't do anything because they're just annoying. And then there's this kind of new age where they're like, hey, what benefit do you guys have? And it's kind of like, okay, cool, we actually do have benefit here. There is kind of that having to give it over in a proper way because the accelerator model has kind of poisoned the well to some degree. There's a couple of good accelerators out there, but there's a few that are terrible. There's one that recently shut down. It just didn't function well. It was kind of useless. So kind of bridging the gap between those two terms and then showing companies that this is very useful. We have some good people. You want to be involved in something like a venture studio. It's not just kind of a sales term. This is legit. So it's been interesting to have to convey that and bring companies into that headspace.
All right, what you got, Chris?
I am fixing my stupid webcam. Yeah, I hear what Zio says because in the past, things just sit down and shut up. Like, we're writing you a check. We don't really need to know the depth. And you go and like, oh, the technology works. And it's like, who cares? Are you going to print any money? Right. But it also shows that there's a sophistication with the investors now. And we also have to remember we're all .com era for the youngins, right? Listening today, tomorrow, hopefully a century from now, was the time the internet just started, and time moves on. Maybe immortality exists when you're listening to this, but people get older and they age of the investing or any industry. So the type of investors that were running and gunning, dealing and wheeling back in the early 2000s are more or less retired now, or they're triple retired. Right, they come back in and out because they're bored. And what does that leave us with? We left are the progeny who learned from them aren't seeing the same deal, so they're essentially having to evolve and adapt to ever-changing standards. And as such, like you get people today who are far more sophisticated because they themselves are feeling the pressure of we can't just get returns by writing big checks.
Yep.
So yeah.
And I think that's where the venture studio model is becoming more appealing and building up more traction. There's a very big movement that we just so happen to be at the beginning of right now, where, like Chris has framed it, we're pretty much co-founders in a box, right? So depending on the engagement, like yes, so there's a ton of different infrastructures and engagement styles for venture studios. The way that we're taking is kind of a hybrid approach, where depending on the level of involvement required, will depend on our level of equity allocation, but that doesn't necessarily turn into it doesn't necessarily impact the amount that we get involved in the business. So we are a collection of experts in particular markets and industries, as well as specific skill sets. And we've culminated a pretty solid group here where we can literally build a business from the ground up. The only instance that we're missing from the core team we have in fractional services, and that's like HR and finance and legal. And as it makes sense, those departments will grow and scale, and we will have that on hand. But if there's something that needs to be done in a company to ensure its success, we can step in as a core team and facilitate supporting that or even doing it. So one of the first companies that we've invested in, which we'll disclose soon, they were able to step in and help ensure that an upcoming engagement they have is a success by supporting in design and development initiatives. So with a 2-week deadline, we're able to say, hey, here's the team capacity that you need. And it's not like they need to cut a tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands dollar check to try to facilitate that support. They have it on hand. So that's where I think you start to get this unfair advantage in the companies that are going to be running through venture studios that have culminated these really strong teams in going to market to have support beyond what they currently have on hand. It's an extension of themselves. So I think that's what we're starting to see, and we're going to. My assumption is, and based on the research that is out there around venture studios, you'll have significantly higher returns as a result of that.
Sweet. Thanks. I know that was a tangent, but yeah, I think that's a really cool perspective too, that we are on the front lines of things changing where just writing checks doesn't work anymore, and that companies are wanting to have the expertise and the support. And I think overall, like, the collaboration is going to make a big difference for those founders and startups who get it and pair with teams like ours who can bring in, and we're all invested. Everybody's invested because we're investing. It's the founders' baby, their business, and so it's a really cool model, I think. And I like the idea that we're shifting towards this more hands-on approach. It is going to be an educational kind of a thing for all of us, because it has been just, I need funding, I need checks, and so yeah. Anyway, that was a tangent, but thanks guys for answering that. I appreciate that, and I think the venture studio is a newer idea that we can also bring education to the marketplace as well. So
Very cool. So this time around and moving forward, we're gonna have a little bit more structure to these things where we'll give our updates and kind of have like these maybe one-off tangents at the very beginning, and then dive into a few questions that we'll answer. So as you all listening have questions that come up too, please let us know and share that as well. But one of the questions I'd like to start by asking and pass around to the team is what motivated you to join Actuate Ventures? I'm going to pass the baton first to Nicole because she's beside me on the screen, but also she has, I think, an interesting response. So, what motivated you to join Actuate Ventures?
A lot. So, I've been here since the very beginning. When we first, as we previously discussed on this podcast, but I will say it again, that we were planning on being a design studio and then scaling this to a venture studio. What originally made me want to join this is because I've been my own independent worker and for like 4 years, and there's only so much that one human can do, and it's, you know, letting go of that control within me that like I have to do everything. And I think that joining this team has showed me, and especially now from like what we've grown into, that how much impact you can make in numbers and bringing all these people together within different expertise. And I always felt this disconnect that I couldn't fully help people as much as I wanted to. And I couldn't really understand fully the whole process of them getting funding. So I think that now that I'll be here within all of that, only my expertise in design and the impact that I make will only grow stronger. So that's a huge, awesome thing that I'm glad I could bring here. Yep. That's pretty much me.
and Nicole's been with us since day zero. So we're very, very happy that you've been with us and excited for your impact to grow for sure.
Well, Carolina's been probably negative something.
Yeah.
You've been pestering her about this idea for I don't know how long.
9 years. For 9 years. We've been together for 9 years, but I heard about the idea for 9 years. But probably he's been thinking about the idea for probably 20 years
Yep.
now. So I didn't think, there's a point in my life that I didn't think this was even going to come to fruition because of all the paths that we've been through. But I'm also surprised that when they say when you put your mind to something and you start taking action, I'm just surprised at how fast this is happening. Because like basically we just fully jump on it since October last year, and we're February, and like so much has happened. Like the team has grown so fast, and and I think it's really cool that there has to be something about the idea that Andrew is selling for people to actually believe in it and decide to jump on the wagon with not like something tangible yet, right? So I commend him for that because definitely is good at like at selling dreams, but not only selling dreams, but actually materializing them. So I think that's cool, and I'm so glad that all of you guys are here because each one of you has like brings so much to the team, and I from Andrew and me, I really hope you guys know how appreciative we are of all of you.
I love that I throw up a heart to second that, and Chris just shakes his head.
I was just waiting for your computer crash or something. Entire call ends. Yeah, it's a little weird because it although it's been around since November-ish of 2023, the shift into the venture studio side really was late December, early January 2024.
Yeah.
Like we weren't set in stone. We're like, how do we organically do this? This comes from my bias, building more organic product suites over the last decade. And then you get the bottle and you get your first customers, you get your annual recurring revenues or ARR, and then you use that to invest, right? And now it's like, well, you're not necessarily, but and then you like maybe you don't need funding. Not everyone needs funding, right? But in this case, it's not necessarily needing funding, but you're building a fund, right? There's a conceptual difference. And you're like, okay, cool. Let's go out to Utah. And then we're like, let's make some connections. We go out to Utah, and then from Utah heads to Vegas, and it just like ramps up, right? So really, since the beginning of the year, right? And today is February 22nd, 2024. Um, it's been like less than 2 months, and we have all the players in place and all things ramped up. So we're going to be starting the offering whenever we legally start the offering. But yeah, you set it out there and you work on it, and it just might come.
So Z, what inspired you to join in the vision and goals of Actuate Ventures?
So it started from like a couple of different points, and the nexus of the idea was sort of venture was very interesting to me. So I've been on the opposite side of the table, and you get an idea of what venture is. It's a little bit BSy, like for lack of a better term. You meet a lot of partners. They're kind of like part of this venture crew, and you'll notice after you've linked up with them on LinkedIn that within a couple of months they're changing to a different one, and they're essentially investment bankers, but like at like a startup level. And you're talking to them about ideas, and they're just kind of like marking down on a scale. They vaguely know about the concept. They'll claim like, we're super into aerospace. They know nothing. They'll ask like something really stupid. You're like, what? Like, you're not involved. Like, you think you're involved, but okay. And I thought that perhaps being on the other side of the table would be something very interesting. Because I do care. Like, all the companies I've been meeting with, I see what it opens up. Like, I see their face. I'm like, oh, I've been on that side. I know that face. And then within 2 minutes or 5 minutes, it changes. Because I'm like, no, I've legitimately been on your side. Just, it's cool. Throw away the deck. Just talk to me. I don't care. It's all good. And they start to smile. They start actually talking deeper to like the weeds of it. And I'll kind of be honest and open up to like, oh, I have no idea what that is. Can you just tell me more? And I'll do a quick Google search to quickly get familiar with it. And yeah, this idea that I had of kind of, hey, I can actually care about what someone else is building and get to know more about it was something that I thought would be something I could do and something I could actually be useful for, for others. And it's turning out that's actually true. Like I can really kind of get into the depth of something and have them be excited to open up more. And with that kind of, get a better insight into these founders' businesses and have them even get a little more insight into themselves, things that they haven't thought about, but they know clearly. They just have to like word it. So it's kind of what brought me to this. And then there's this aspect of I love aerospace. I think anything that kind of goes in the air, whether that's to space or in the air, it's very cool because that's very weird. It's hard for humans to get that done. Like even in the water, we did dry land, and like getting in the air, it's very cool. I've always wanted to like fly a fighter jet. I'd love to one day get that done. But yeah, that's kind of what brought me here.
Speaking of flying fighter jets, had a really cool conversation yesterday with a guy named Brian that y'all probably meet soon, but literally flew armed spy jets.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. He's from U2. Yeah, I didn't even get to ask him in depth about that. He told me I flew the U2, and I was like, I have too much stuff to discuss right now. But I have to ask about that. That's so cool.
For sure. And Lori, you're one of the newest members in this crowd. What drew you to what we're doing?
Well, honestly, I have been on the venture capital side too, marketer first and foremost. But the thing about the traditional VC firm was that there was a lot of red tape. There was a lot of gatekeeping. There was a lot of walls built up between myself being able to actually work with the portfolio companies. And so, Andrew, when you first mentioned a venture studio, I actually hadn't heard of it. I am newer also to the VC landscape, which actually gives me an edge because I don't actually speak all the lingo. So I can like download what the VCs say and then actually like give it in regular speak, I'll say. But the idea of the Venture Studio, and that's why I wanted to make the point at the beginning of this episode, is that there is a lot more hands-on, and that is so exciting to me, to be able to be there, rolling my sleeves up, working with the companies, and then this team. I looked y'all up on LinkedIn when Andrew mentioned y'all's names, and just said, you know what, like this is a really cool group. Very skilled, very experienced in what they know and what they do. And I said, yeah, I want to be a part of this because it is a area that is going to impact the world and future generations. And so I'll throw in, I am a mom, and so I want to make sure that I am not only doing cool work with startups and creating cool businesses, but businesses that have an impact, and I can be a change agent for good, for the future generations. And do what I can to operate in that space. So yeah.
Love that. Thank you. And it's amazing to have you all here, and an honor to come together to literally build the future. Um, so really, really stoked about that. I don't want to say venture, but that mission that we've all kind of adopted. Um, so we do have another question lined up that I think might be interesting to pass around as well. Um, and I'd love to hear some perspectives on it. So what is an undervalued or underrated deep tech or aerospace innovation that could make a bigger impact than people realize? I'm going to pass this along to Chris and Z to start us off with.
I know that you had some ideas, so yeah, let's get started.
It's funny. I mean, that's what I mentioned earlier. Is like it's a super base level innovation, utilizing what already exists on these spacecraft instead of having to update things from like a brand new spot. It's something that kind of blew me away. There's a part of me that's like very quite into alternative energy, but it's really hard to find information on it. Nobody's doing it, and a few people who are really cool, and then they go underground very, very quickly. Like recently, I saw this nuclear battery, that kind of like a AA battery, and I was like, oh, I want one, send me one, you know, wrap it in lead and ship it. I'll put it in whatever I got. I don't care. It's all good. I'm like, I love that stuff. I think that's a really big deal. And that's not underrated. There's also kind of tapping into different energy fields, which is that's like super, super out there. Magnetic fields, that whole like wavelength spectrum that exists. Thoughts of tapping into that for energy. I don't know if that's underrated. I just know it's super under the radar. It's something most people don't even consider, even though we kind of learn a lot about wavelengths. We learn in school as kids. We learn about like, oh, there's a light spectrum. Here's you have gamma rays and stuff. We don't realize that's energy. That's energy kind of in a really freeform state floating around us. Wi-Fi waves, radio waves, these things are there. I'm very, very into. Then there's kind of this really low-tech technology that Andrew and I discussed, and it's kind of the nodal technology, for lack of a better way to put it. You can think about it in the sense that when we use our cellular telephones, right, let's use like the really old word for it, you're connecting to the cell tower, which is then broadcasting your message, etc. You're depending on a provider who's put in the money to kind of put in this infrastructure. There's a really old way of communicating. It's called like a walkie-talkie or radio, kind of using all the same terms. And essentially, your device throws out a certain amount of signal and it can communicate with anything within vicinity. It's kind of like FM radio, AM radio. That's how these technologies work. Now, our devices have enough battery to kind of throw out enough of this signal, and there's enough individual phones in the world that we can kind of communicate directly to each other. We don't need if I'm standing near you, we don't need to bounce the signal all the way to the cell tower and back to you. It's a very old school kind of tech, and it's something that could be utilized, and it is in certain ways. I think that to a degree is really what's underutilized. Everyone has a phone in their pocket. We could really be increasing battery life, increasing reliability of signal to a degree that would be kind of insane. It's funny that actually it's kind of relevant specifically today. If you notice in the US, EP09 is down and Verizon is down. I think it's a little scary what's happening there. Systems like this would actually be very, very reliable because what it relies on is population density, which we have. And they're not like, you don't need, it doesn't need to be crazy dense, it just needs to be some basic population density. It's kind of the two areas, and it's two really different sides of the spectrum. One is like super deep and esoteric, and the other one is kind of like, hey, we have that. Why is it not used?
Yeah, relay kind of based communication networks have been floating around for like a century, right? And it's really so what that we try to hit on here at Actuate is not every technology is like the newest thing, but we take older technologies that are just not in flavor, right? Some things that we have on the table are like that are underrated, or anything that we feel improves humanity, but in a and doesn't have to necessarily break the bank with innovation. And we often forget that within kind of human technology development is that not everything is progressive. Some things just kicked off the table. So one of the underrated things that I'm looking at are newer organic fibers. By newer, I mean older. So for instance, we used to have milk-based clothing for a long time. So you could tear milk and do a very simple chemical process, and it turns into a fairly reliable fiber. And we're all looking as like, oh, this is the greatest thing, and this is what actually happens when someone like Z or I come to the table with DD. We're very we're incredulous to like someone saying like, check out this new thing. It's like, well, this new thing isn't that new, so what are you doing, right? And in my head, okay, cool. You have you're bringing milk fibers back into the fray, right? But what it's revealing in society is we're tired of plastics like polyesters and nylons. And so there's a lot of possibly newer innovations in organic derived fibers that would benefit humanity. Recently, researchers cracked the code on spider silk and did a very simple CRISPR onto silkworms. And I think they produced an enhanced silkworm thread that's about 90% of the strength of spider silk, which is, to our knowledge today, outside of like graphene and nanotubes, the strongest fiber that we have. So the clothing of the future is hopefully less plastic and more sustainable. But where those innovations, I feel like it's going to be in like interesting organic fibers. And if we can build the fibers ourselves, right, in a more repeatable fashion, that means we can also start engineering things like electrodes or sensors directly into things as well. So a lot more organic engineering.
Very cool. And what I love that kind of leads into about maybe like 10 or 12 years ago, I started looking into like smart fibers and innovation in smart fibers. So it'll be really interesting to see how the new innovations for these older considered innovations or technologies or materials evolves with the infusion of technology and things like that. My take in regards to maybe not underrated, but I don't know. It feels like it's also, like Z was saying, under the radar. There's a handful of people that are kind of poking at it and trying to solve it, but it's not really being attacked, because a lot of the innovation technology that you see, or at least that I've seen, is facilitating individual innovations or parts of what would become an ecosystem naturally. But the way that we, myself and this team, I would say, because I was going to say myself and Z and Chris and name all of us individually, but the way this team approaches problem solving is we consider the holistic impact, right? We think about how do we create an ecosystem in which to solve problems. So when we're approaching our problem solving like that, one of the underlying aspects of that is the infrastructure it takes to support it. So very much like Amazon did, they leveraged existing infrastructure to scale and then scaled from there. Well, in some of these spaces that we're getting into, some of the problem spaces that we're getting into, and some of the solutions that we're seeing, it's leveraging existing infrastructure to the best that it can, but in some places the infrastructure doesn't exist. So what is it to actually create infrastructure to support where we're going in a holistic way, focusing on the ecosystem? That is a perspective, I would say, is probably not at least widely spoken about, that we are actively focusing on and filtering our lens through when it comes to exploring these innovations in these various companies, is how do we string together these innovations to create holistic level or ecosystem level environments for the future to be built from.
And I'd say on that, it's not necessarily a deep tech or aerospace specific, but I am, being the endurance runner and nature girl, I'm really interested then in how these smart cities and things like that work with the water and the water conservation and storage and using water in this ecosystem. And so, yeah, well, it's not deep tech. It does come into play in a lot of different areas, and how, because we can have all the solar power we want, but if we don't have sustainable, water storage and practical, but also very sustainable usage, it's we aren't gonna. There's not going to be any population in these smart cities, so.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm. Yeah, it's not directly, but it's a peripheral kind of thing that I'm very interested in supporting and learning more and doing what we can to make those ecosystems life sustaining in all ways, not just AI robots.
Yeah, I agree. And also on that thread of line, I heard about companies that are working currently on developing foods that you don't necessarily need to use big amounts of water, or you don't even need the land for agriculture anymore. So I think that's something interesting to explore, because when you're thinking about the future, definitely it's not going to be in our timeline, but like a couple hundred years down the line, and let's say people living outside of Earth, what are you going to do with regards to food? Because you cannot constantly be shipping food from here all the way up there. It's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be cost efficient, things like that. So how can we create environments where we can grow these things without having to depend on Earth, basically? So I think that's like something not necessarily rooted in deep tech, but it's something that goes definitely tied with the water source.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned.
And one thing I love.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the growing things without Earth. It's something I'm actually like working on setting up right here, aquaponics and hydroponics. And it's not high tech. It's really straightforward. The issue is scaling that up. So like if you want to do, I forgot which one is aqua and which one is hydro. One of them essentially uses fish. You'd have the fish tank, you supply the nitrogen. It's fantastic. And then you can eat the fish. It's kind of this like cycle. It's really easy to set up and it kind of does it itself. But for you to do it at home, it's pretty easy. You don't even need a lot of space, and it produces like quite a bit. I have a friend who does it. He like almost lives off that for fruits and vegetables. He has like a family. It's really, really doable. The question is though how you scale that, and like I would love to hear about companies trying to do that, because it's really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, actually, I heard of a company that was already implementing something like that in supermarkets directly. So instead of like you have these shelves where let's say you have I don't know herbs and stuff like that, and you have your vegetables, and they're being grown on site on the supermarket without you having to go to the farmers or without having to use land and without all of that stuff. So I think it's more sustainable, right?
It's brilliant. That's a great
And
idea.
it's super cool. Yeah, yeah. When I heard about it, like I was like, wow, that's super cool, and like something that you heard about, like probably having your own piece of like a garden, like a raised garden outside on your yard or something like that. But how cool to go to a supermarket and let's say buy a head of lettuce and just like see it how it evolves on site, and you can get like I don't think there's anything fresher that you can
You
get.
can literally pick it off the shelf instead of that's fantastically cool. It's also I always think about it's
Yeah.
infinite. Like when you're buying a tomato or like dill in the grocery, that thing's infinite. It's a little seed. If you took it, you could have it forever. But we go back, we get another one. It's like, hey, just make it right here. make it. It's not. It's a little bit of work, but it's doable. That's a cool idea to scale though. That's incredible. I like that idea.
Yeah. We also need to. So some of the things that we want to do here at Actuate, right, is we're seeding the future. That also implies that we're introducing cultural changes that we'll see over decades, if not several generations. And a lot of that is like, how do we get beyond gimmicky changes? Like the way that we enjoy our supermarkets today are based on our experiences in our lifetime. And supermarkets are relatively new in the human consciousness, right? You don't like see a movie from like 100 years ago and like see a supermarket, right? That didn't really exist. So will people accept picking fruits and veggies from supermarket shelves, right? I don't know. But we should be able, when we think about products that we want to encourage or invest in, right? We also want to think of the human aspect. Is it someone that has a hydroponic system? Are they really thinking end to end about how it gets into the person's hand, right? That is absolutely something that's a bent of mine that I will be introducing to every portfolio company that we onboard. That it's not like, cool, I have a product, right? Um, there's a lot of opportunity for us to do good.
100%. Absolutely love the chat today, and please feel free to um, share your questions with us on the various channels that we're present on, and let us know how you imagine some of the underrated or undervalued considerations in some of the innovative spaces that are today, and maybe we can have a conversation about that together at scale. All right, who wants to close us out? That'll be me. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Let us know if you like the new structure as opposed to the very loosey goosey approach that we had before. I think we're liking it a little bit better. So hopefully it was nice for you to follow along. Feel free to submit any questions or comments that you have in whatever medium that you are watching or listening to this on. And I think that we can start to engage in different ways, like questions and answers. So we'll be exploring that as well. But yeah, happy to have you here with us. We are growing together to go with the seeding and growing conversation, and looking forward to next week's episode with you all. So have yourselves an awesome weekend and week ahead.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.